When I grew up in the 80s and 90s in San Diego, it was very, very conservative. And so, my environment going to school was not an easy one. I think when you're growing up and you're one of the few representations of your community that you see, especially this is after the hostage crisis and then during the Gulf War, there was just a lot of Islamophobia, but we didn't even have that term back then. And there was a lot of open racism. So when I went to college, I very quickly became politically active. I think I was a little bit hungry for it. My childhood had been really infused with politics. I'm the policy director at a civil rights organization. We do immigrants' rights advocacy across the state of California. So I help lead the policy department in our analysis of public policy issues for immigrants in the state. We work very closely with community-based organizations from all different types of ethnic communities, tackling things like civil rights issues as well as their quality of life, access to jobs, and education. I mostly work on state policy, so looking at things like immigrants who are held in detention. We've worked very hard to get state access to resources for immigration attorneys for people who are being detained in immigrant prisons. So in our country, typically what happens is when an individual comes over and they ask for asylum, they're immediately put into an immigrant detention prison. And then the government will charge them with a deportation order. So it's a federal prosecutor who's charging them. And they are forced to go before an immigration judge and argue against this prosecutor, and they're not given access to an attorney, which I think when we think about the U.S. Constitution is really surprising to most Americans. And so we've really undertaken this campaign to bring universal representation and access to counsel for everybody who's incarcerated in the state. Wow. This is a really difficult time to be doing immigrants' rights work in the United States and globally. There's an open strain of anti-immigrant xenophobia in a way that's made it challenging, from the Muslim ban to the spate of executive orders we've seen from the administration to what's happening down at the border. It's a really different time, and it's a very difficult time because there's just open threats that are coming out against immigrant communities on a regular basis. For me, if I were growing up and the Muslim ban were to have been in place, it would have really changed the trajectory of my life and my identity, because so many of those relatives who were coming over and giving me a direct point of contact with Iran in this very real and meaningful way would not have been able to come. The reality, though, is that borders and foreign policy have always acted as a ban. There's been lots of family separation. It's just happening in an overt mass form. I never met my father's father. He passed away before I could ever meet him. He wasn't able to come to the US, and I wasn't able to go to Iran. And so I think, unfortunately, diasporic communities, people who live in exile, our families are full of these stories of separation. What's so odious about the travel ban is that it's taking that across the board and applying it to entire nationalities.